What you're seeing here is StationFall in its current state of development, and this is what it looked like around 6 months ago. I'm going to show you all of the features I have developed for StationFall so far. Before doing any coding work on StationFall, I wanted to plan out exactly what kind of features I wanted it to have, and this is what I came up with. The game's going to be in a top-down perspective similar to that of Stardew Valley. It's also going to be a psychological horror game, and one of the core mechanics is a glitch and sanity system. The setting of StationFall is going to mostly be on a space station. The player will have some opportunity to explore an alien world as well. The other core mechanics is some branching dialogue so that the player's decisions actually matter, and the final thing was an inventory system in the same sort of style as Resident Evil and Dredge. The first thing I built was a basic player movement controller. This was just a simple red sprite going across a screen. I did have one slight problem with my movement controller though, and that was that the player could move quicker diagonally than it could in the other directions. I found out that the reason for this was because I was using clamp magnitude when I should have been normalising the X and Y values of my input. As soon as this was fixed, the sprite moved at the same speed in all directions. The last thing to do was actually get a character to appear on the screen. I've also used the sprite blender feature of Unity. That way, the simple sprites that I have designed can easily be selected for which direction the player's moving in. With that basic player controller finished, it was time to move on to something a lot more complicated, and that was AI. After a bit of research, I thought the best approach for AI would be steering behaviours, as something like A-star pathfinding was far too overkill for a project like this. I found a couple of videos on steering behaviours from a creator called Game Endeavour and Sunny Valley Studios. I added a seek and obstacle avoidance behaviour so that the AI could chase the player character, and then I looked at adding a flee logic. Whilst adding the flee logic, it seemed to break the other behaviours. What was happening was my AI was trying to move towards the player and at a certain distance also move away due to the flee behaviour. I think that the problem is due to the fact that I haven't got a detector so that the AI knows when it should flee, and this will be based on health. Because my enemies didn't have any health yet, I thought it was best to move on from the flee behaviour and just have the seek and obstacle avoidance working. I was really happy to get those two features to work anyway. I've also got plenty of ideas of what other behaviours I want to add to my AI. The one behaviour I thought about adding to my AI is something like a hive mind. This is where enemies can share with other enemies where the player's location is and lead to stuff like swarming, which I think would be perfect for a psychological horror game. If you have any other ideas on steering behaviours or that hive mind behaviour I've mentioned, just let me know in the comments and I'd love to explore what other options I have. I was so happy to have those two basic steering behaviours finished that I wanted to concentrate on some art. Just like every other game dev on YouTube that's working on pixel art games, I've decided to use A-Sprite. If it's good enough for them, it's good enough for me. Something else that has greatly helped with my pixel art skills is a book called Pixel Logic by Michael Azzi. For anyone looking to get into pixel art and learning about animations and all of the other things in pixel art, I'd highly recommend this book. Star Trek Enterprise is an influence on character design and also level design. Here's a quick time lapse of me making my first character. After making the character, I quickly made some tiles and imported them to Unity to make some simple levels. I'm really excited to see how the art will grow further in StationFall's development, and you'll actually see some of those improvements later in the video. And please feel free to leave any feedback about art in the comments. I was really happy to have some basic art and now needed a change of pace, so I went back to coding, this time tackling the inventory system. Do you ever get bored of an inventory system that is just arbitrary weight limits? Because StationFall is definitely going to be more than that. Games like Fallout are great, but the inventory could be so much better, hence why I'm looking to Resident Evil and Dredge as inspirations. Plus, a grid inventory is much better suited to psychological horror, in my opinion. Now I have a plan, let's build it. It works by using a list to store items picked up by the character. Each item is a scriptable object, which is a super powerful tool, and I can add new items with a few clicks. I don't even have to write any additional code. With that working, it was time to move on to the UI. First I created the grid and then found the position of the mouse on the screen in relation to that grid. Once that was done, it was then a case of adding some items and then getting them to move around the UI so the player can place them where they want. I then added a rotation logic as the next thing. However, when items started to get rotated, they weren't in the position on the grid that they were meant to be. After a bit of trial and error, I found out that it was the rect transform. For each of the UI icons, the rect transform was set to the centre, when it should have been set to the bottom left. Once this was done, the items started to rotate more in the way that I expected, however they were still offset from where they should be. That's when I then had to apply an offset in code. What this offset does is as the item rotates, it applies that offset so that the item should occupy the exact same cells that it was in, just that it's been rotated. There's still a bit more work to be done on the inventory, some of which I'll cover in this video later. At this point I was really happy that I've got an inventory system to work, and now I wanted to develop some of the core mechanics for StationFall, the most important of which is the glitch and sanity system. I knew the type of effect that I wanted to have the glitch effect, it's just that I didn't know how to do it. So after some research, I found that the best approach was shaders, and one tutorial in particular, from Binary Luna, was really helpful. I followed that tutorial and adapted it to my own needs. My sanity system is completely dynamic in how it applies the glitch effect. This builds and fades based on the character's mental state. How does it work exactly? First it takes the value of current sanity and divides it with the max sanity, which gives a duration for the effect. Then a coroutine makes the glitch stronger as time passes, hitting its peak halfway through before fading again. All of this is tied directly to shader properties, so I can control noise, scan lines, and the glitch effect in real time. Currently, the player's sanity is decreased through combat, environmental objects, and through dialogue, which I'll cover in the next section of the video. Some other planned features are unreliable UI for displaying health and the inventory incorrectly. I also want to add a drug system inspired by Fallout, where the player character can get addicted to drugs and further reduce their sanity. Drugs will be found in the space station as well as being craftable items. The other thing that I want the sanity system to do is affect what enemies the player faces and how strong they are. I'm super excited to keep working on the sanity system, and I'm really happy with the basic implementation of it so far. My next job was to work on some dialogue and making my NPCs talk. I like the dialogue systems found in KOTOR and Fallout, and that is the exact kind of system I have built out for StationFall. I'm using scriptable objects like I have for the inventory, and created nodes for my dialogue, and I have taken the same approach for missions. This makes it easy to edit in the Unity editor. First, I printed some basic dialogue to the console, and then started to print it to some UI once that worked. Next, I added in some decision logic. For each decision, a button will be added to the UI, allowing for branching dialogue and making sure the character's decisions matter. The other advantage with branching dialogue and multiple endings is that it gives the player a chance to play through the game more than once and get a different outcome. The last part was some quick time events for dialogue, making critical decisions even more critical that will ultimately affect the story. The first mission I have added is a fetch mission. This was more because it is the most basic type of mission. I know it's only basic so far, but I will expand it in the future to involve puzzles, killing a number of enemies, and so much more. With it being a scriptable object approach, it should be much easier to add in any mission type I can think of. After all this work, I took a break and performed in the first round of Battle of the Bands. Here are a couple of short clips from that gig. We managed to win that round and progress to the semi-finals. It was a huge hit of adrenaline, and I took that energy back into my work with StationFall. It was time to improve art and finally add a save system. This next section is on general polish. First, I added in some particle effects and shaders to give my alien world a more alien look. Would you agree that it looks a bit more alien? The other thing I've done with shaders is for the inventory UI. What I've done is for items related to health is that I've made one item and then I can customise the way it looks or its colour through shaders. This means that I only have to draw one of those items and not have to recolour it for its different purposes. The next area of improvement was an enemy. I still need to name the enemy, but I have an idea on this. But for now, here is a time lapse of me designing it. I also added some decorative assets, a space shuttle inspired by Star Trek, a tree or flower looking thing, beds and so much more. I needed to give the player visual feedback of the enemy taking damage. This is with particle effects, a health bar and blood splatter. The player also gets a health bar and sanity bar as parts of these improvements. I have also done a bit more work on the inventory by adding a hotbar and allowing equipping of items to the character's hand. A save system was the next thing, and I had been putting this off for a while. But every game needs a save system, and I'm using JSON and the data is saved to individual text files. It wasn't all smooth sailing. A simple task, making the character respawn when changing scenes, became a bit of a headache. Every time the character spawned in the main corridor, the scene was completely blank. I tried everything from delaying spawning, manually spawning, and resetting the player to the correct position, and nothing worked. It took me too long to realise I was overthinking, and instead I should do the very first thing when there's a bug. Use debug.log. Turns out that the empty game object I used to respawn the player had the wrong Z positions. An easy mistake, and a reminder to always start with the simplest solution first. Once the Z position was 0, it worked properly. With all the visual improvements I'd made, it was looking rather odd that the enemy was taking damage but the player actually had no weapon equipped to them, so I wanted to fix that. The first weapon I have introduced to StationFall is an energy-based weapon. It's been inspired by weapons from Star Trek as well as from the Fallout franchise. I'm using raycasting, which sends an invisible beam, and if it hits something that has a health script, it will deal damage to that game object. For me, raycast is easier than dealing with spawning in projectiles and handling their physics. It's a time lapse of me programming my modular weapon system. The weapon script takes in a weapon scriptable object, meaning all I have to do is switch the weapon and all the damage values and fire rates will automatically be updated. To add to the visuals some more, I have used a line renderer, which is another advantage of raycasts. This made it really easy to get the energy weapons that I have been inspired by from Star Trek and Fallout. I can also customise the look of each weapon through shader graph, meaning there is less artwork to do. The weapon floats around the player and points whichever way the mouse is pointing. The firing arc is limited to 90 degrees in whichever way the player is facing, to ensure some balance. When testing out the weapon system, I was shocked that it worked first time. I was more than used to features not working straight away, so this felt like a massive win. It looked so much better that my character as a weapon in their hand now. You're now up to date with all the progress I've made on StationFall so far. I know it might not seem a lot of progress for 6 months, but a lot of these features I've been working on for the very first time. Going forward, I want to continue development on StationFall. The next thing I want to work on is getting a crafting system in, and then also getting the inventory into a polished enough state where I'm happy. I'd also love to get as much feedback as possible in the comments. If you have any ideas of what you'd like to see in StationFall, just write it down. For me, the main goal is to get you, my audience, involved in the development of StationFall. I really want to build a community around the games that I make. With that, I have set up a Discord where I'll be looking to give updates as regularly as I can. The other places you can find me are on Blue Sky, Threads, and Twitter or X, whichever one you want to call it. The links to all of these will be in the description. Finally, if you've enjoyed the video, a like and subscribe would greatly help and show that I've done a good job. I'll be looking to publish the next devlog within a month, so stay tuned for future updates.